Alright, in today's video, I thought I'd start with the end and the beginning to show you the final result. This is Misty from Pokemon, and that's all I know about her. I know my kids were all into Pokemon at one point or another, and I was looking for more of a simple model to go ahead and build and paint this time around, and I liked her pose, so I figured why not, let's go ahead and paint up Misty from Pokemon. A lot of times with 3D printed models, there is issues where the parts won't always fit perfectly without some adjustments. And here's one example where the key, the peg portion of the hair that's supposed to slip into the hole on her head is just too long. It's just physically impossible to fit it in with her hand there. So this is actually more common than you would think. At least it's been my experience to be more common than you would think to find these kind of issues with 3D printed models. So here, after I'm kind of making sure it wasn't me not understanding how it went together, trying every different angle I could, realized that the key is just too long here. So I'm going ahead and I'm just gonna cut that key a little bit, and then we'll get it to fit in where it should go. And even if I cut it, and I think I actually kind of cut it a couple times to make sure I got it to fit properly. It's like I said, this is pretty common. I actually had the problem with her legs, the top of her legs, when they met her shorts. I didn't think it was going to be a big process. It ended up being a big process, but unfortunately I didn't put that on video. But I used milliput and a lot of sculpting to actually fill the gap between her leg and her shorts. But you'll see the end product of that when we get to the painting of the legs. And here I've just got the model assembled and not glued together or anything. That's why you can actually see the model wiggling around a little bit. It's just stacked there, unglued. And the reason I did this is to make sure the model's in its final pose for the Zenithal highlighting I'm doing. It's already been primed. I use a Chaos Black primer from Citadel, and then here I'm going over it with a white ink to go ahead and give it the Zenithal highlighting. Basically what this does is it just shows me where all the light and the shadow would be, with the light source coming basically from the top. I'm just going around the model here and making sure I get all the areas of it properly highlighted. I'm just paying attention to certain areas that would be more directly exposed to the light. Top of her head, her chest, her one forearm that's raised, the back of her thigh there, and the heel of her shoe. And just going around and making sure that's that. Then this will just help with the overall light and darkness of the rest of the colors when we get to that point. And now I'm doing the same thing with the little Pokeball that she ends up holding, her suspenders that go over her shoulders, her arm. I left those off while I did the priming of the main model because I didn't want those to actually interfere with shadows would be. I didn't think they were a major enough part of the model to incorporate shadows on the main torso of her. But so we're going ahead and get the Zenithal on those. Now I'm going to switch to a Sunset Red from Vallejo, and this is we're going to start on the skin. And I put this down first as just a good underlayer color for the skin. And this gives it a really, in my opinion, a really kind of a robust undertone, undercolor, if you will. It's really good for me, way to start most skin colors, depending on the shade and tone of the final skin. So Misty's relatively a pale skin, not quite as pale as the Jinx that I did in the previous video, but pretty close. And so I'm going to take a similar approach here. So going around and doing all the portions of Misty that have skin and getting a solid color of this Sunset Red. And it's thin, so even though I'm putting across the entire model, whether it's in a highlighted area or a shadowed area, it's thin coat, so the highlights and shadows will still show through after it dries, and that'll carry forward for the other skin colors we put on as we go forward here. And sometimes the Zenithal just acts as like a visual indicator for you while you're painting, and it won't necessarily be apparent through all your paint colors as you paint a model. just be a nice visual reference for you if you decide to put like a real heavy shadow color in the undersides and in that. But here you can definitely see on the top, because the top of this torso here has her shirt covering it, so it's like it's still almost black there on the top portions. And I'm switching to a red ink, and red ink is kind of going back and kind of reinforcing those shadow areas again. This is watered down quite a bit too, so it's not just straight red ink. It's got a lot of water into it. And again, just kind of accentuating where the shadow areas are, where maybe the underside of a fold or a crease in the skin would be as well. And we're going to do this for all the skin pieces here, all the pieces that have skin on them. And the knees are real particular area to get. There's a lot of folds and creases and whatnot around the knee. And the torso, again, that's where that top part is, where it's really in shadow from the shirt. That's kind of the loose end of the bottom of the shirt that's hanging over that. And again, the undersides of the torso. This torso is going to end up being my problem child for this model. We get into here in a little bit after the skin is done. One thing is these pieces are heavy. This was not a hollowed out piece, and I kind of struggled with the way I was holding it, the support with the stick and the poster tack in the hole with the stick. It's a lot heavier than I anticipated. I just a lot more problems with it overall, as you'll see me struggle through the rest of the video with this particular piece. Switching to a basic skin color here. I tried this one. I haven't had a lot of experience with this particular color from Vallejo, and it went on okay. It was a lot thicker than I expected. Even I have it watered down a lot more than I typically would with the Vallejo paint, and it was still going on a little thicker than I had planned. But in the end, it worked out fine. I like to experiment with new colors just to see if there's a new favorite color I haven't found yet. So it was good color. Just some of the scale paints are interesting. Some are extremely thick, like this one was, and some are not. So it's kind of really hit and miss what you're going to get every time you open up a new bottle of paint with them. That's been my experience anyhow. So again, going ahead, and this is pretty much a full coverage, again, like we did with the Sunset Red in the beginning. This is like the kind of now establishing the main actual maybe color tone of the skin, whereas what we did underneath was providing the tones of what this color is going to be, if that makes sense. So here we got Light Flesh from Vallejo. Going ahead and putting that on the now from like the top down. This would be like Zenithal again, if you will, just where the light sources are going to be hitting the skin mostly. And just going ahead and making sure we have those top down areas covered. This piece, like I said already, it's heavier. Here I'm just holding it by the shirt. The stick was just not working for me at this point. Coming from painting smaller miniatures, 32 mil scale Warhammer, type stuff, to 1/6 scale figures here, it's really easy to underestimate the weight of each piece. You just can't stick it on a little holder and have the whole model there. You can whip around without any issues. That the weight is something to definitely consider, and it's something I need to kind of consider more when I have these type of pieces, as a better way of just overall supporting them. I'm moving over to an Orcish Dermis here to go back and put some of the shadow, fold, crease areas of the skin back in, put some of the color back in as well. This is watered down quite a bit as well, so this is definitely not right out of the bottle per se. It's watered down, oh man, almost 50-50 I would say with water. And again, this is to just go ahead and hit those areas kind of where we did with the red ink earlier, and then a little bit more to put some of the color back into the skin. Again, just going through and hitting kind of at an angle here to make sure I get the folds of her abdomen there, and get the get it looking like it should. And just going ahead and hitting the face as well. Again, really careful with the face not to illuminate the highlights that we did, but also to put color into the face from the underside there a little bit. Using that light flash again, just to kind of, like I just said, go into this back and forth here to make sure that you get the right balance between what's highlighted and what is shadow here. Here I'm pushing back some of that dermis that got maybe a little out of control. Went a little further than I wanted it to, so I'm just kind of backing it off a little bit. And at this point also these lighter skin tones are also watered down significantly to help with the blending. Here I'm using a ultra matte varnish. This is key. This is absolutely critical, my opinion, to go ahead and now lock in the skin color. Basically what this is doing is it's putting on a very protective coat, where now if I accidentally hit paint onto the skin when I'm painting anything else, I have the ability to kind of wipe off that paint. It won't immediately like sink into the skin color. I can't leave it on forever, of course, but if you're quick, you can use like a wet brush and then wipe it off the varnish. So it's very important, at least for the way I approach my painting, is to put that varnish on kind of at steps that I want to make sure I lock in. Here I'm using a contrast Frost Heart, and we're going to start her shorts. So I'm just going ahead and kind of using this as a base coat to get the blue on her shorts. Again, it's leveraging that Zenithal as well, so it's going to be darker on the undersides, lighter on the top. That black mark you saw on her back pocket there, that's actually where her hand rests on the model. That's why when we did the Zenithal, it left it black there, because her hand was actually resting right against it. Switching over to a sky blue from Pro Acryl and doing a top down now. This gives us the, just like we did with the skin, from the top down, it gives us the lighter blue where the sun, or the light source rather, is going to be showing on the shorts, and then you can see the underside is still a darker blue there. Here I'm using a High Lord Blue speed paint, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this, and this is catching all those folds and wrinkles from the bottom, and this is really giving it the shade, the shadows, and the highlighting those wrinkles, and really giving it that extra contrast of light to dark, where the shorts, the fabric of the shorts would have those wrinkles and folds. And there's the final result of the blue on the shorts. We're going with a black gray. This color I chose for her belt. And interesting thing, whenever I choose colors for a model that I do, I like to usually go back to the original source from the model. So in this case, Misty from Pokemon was a cartoon from, I don't even know what era, 90s maybe, was it? Again, I didn't look up the time frame, but it was an older cartoon, and it was very simple. The color palette was very simple. But one thing I found was very interesting is in all the cartoons I found of Misty, she never wore a belt. But obviously the sculpture had one, so we have to paint it. So I went with the most kind of nondescript color, just pretty much a black belt. Now I chose this off black. I don't like painting on models directly with black to start with. If you do that, it kind of leaves you no room left to do any shadow to it. If you want to, you're kind of just stuck at the darkest color right off the bat. So I always try to avoid just straight black unless it's something like the base or some other specific scenario where it definitely requires, jet black. So anyhow, I'm going ahead and just going slowly around the model here and painting this in. I believe I left this part of the video at real time, so this is actually the real speed of me painting, which it is what it is. But I thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit why I paint and why I chose to go ahead and start a YouTube video for anyone that might be interested. If not, just go ahead and skip ahead to after the belt's done, because that's when I pick up the normal narration of the painting. But in the last video of the Jinx that I did, I talked about I wanted to do it for my daughter for a Christmas present, and really enjoyed how it made her feel to, get the model and see the model painted and her appreciation for it. And that's kind of like the encouragement I have to continue to do the painting. I really enjoy painting for others. So I guess, why do you paint? I enjoy painting for others, whether it's family, friends, or now on YouTube, to be able to share that with the viewers here. And I'm just kind of curious why, anyone watching this video, if you do paint, why do you paint? Do you paint for the same reasons? Do you paint for yourself? Paint for money? I mean, I do commission painting as well, so I definitely understand that, but that's not really my main driver for doing it. But I absolutely understand that aspect as well. And the other portion I wanted to talk about here a little bit was, and I touched on this already a little bit earlier, was this whole converting from a mainly painting smaller scale models, the 32 millimeters up 75 millimeter stuff, now to this 1/6 scale. Why I'm doing 1/6 scale, and kind of some of the early challenges I'm noticing of moving up into a larger scale is for me being able to see a larger model for video sake and for kind of even demonstration purposes. It's a lot easier, my opinion, it's a lot easier for me to be able to do this on video. Like, for example, the belt here. It's a lot easier to see this belt at a 1/6 scale than if I tried to paint a belt on a 32 millimeter model, that the belt itself would be barely visible. But also, I just really enjoy this huge, quote, huge statue at the end of it. Something in like a really nice display piece rather than this, little 32 mil scale, which is about 34 roughly millimeters tall little dude, that hardly anyone can see, sitting on a shelf. So I really enjoy having this larger scale statues that you can go ahead and put on your bookcase, put on a shelf, put in a display case, if you will. So it's kind of been super cool to see some of these things come to life. The challenges are, like I said earlier, for me right now, it's the weight of the piece, and not coming to grips yet with the best way to always support the piece. I try not to hold the actual piece as much as possible, although here I am now doing that, but I try to also put on a glove whenever possible to make sure that the oils in my skin don't take the paint off or affect the paint color. I don't always put a glove on, as you'll see in the video, and here and there I do, here and there I don't. But just that one stick that I have on here is not enough to hold this model steady while I paint. Everything here, I'm going around and painting on the belt. So yeah, the dynamics of the larger piece that I'm painting and the additional weight of each piece has got a definite learning curve over a 32 mil, typical 32 millimeter scale model. And I actually enjoy it. I actually love the new challenge of it, and it allows my painting skills to carry forward, but in a kind of almost like a new medium. Obviously, it's not a new medium, but when you change up the scales that much, it's fresh and new, is how it feels to me, which is great. Speaking of fresh and new, also is I vastly underestimated the amount of time it takes to create video, YouTube video, and edit it, and do the thumbnail and everything that goes along with it. And I dreadfully underestimated the amount of time it takes, and I wanted to get this video out much sooner than I actually am. And that's another area for me it's a challenge. It's an area for growth, learning and growth, which I think is wonderful. But now that I understand and these videos aren't professionally edited or polished or have any cool special effects or transitions, even, for that matter, and all that. They are about as basic as they get, and even that takes quite a while to get these together. So it's a learning experience, but again, one that I find very enjoyable, very interesting, and definitely want to continue to do. And I'd like to know if you if anyone here appreciates the kind of the rambling and the backstory and what's going on here, or you just want me to stick to the actual painting narration and to kind of skip out what kind of the thought process behind the scenes are, let me know. Either way, I would love to know. Anyhow, let's at this point going to go ahead, and the belt is now wrapped up for the most part, and we're going to jump back to regular paint narration. Here I'm using the bold white from Pro Acryl. I have Silly Putty masked off the leg while I'm going ahead and spraying the boot. Remember, Silly Putty is going to come into a big part of the video coming up here, the problem child I had. But for right now, it's working great. And like I said, using that as a mask to keep the leg protected while I put this bold white on the shoe. Like I said earlier, I don't like to go pure black. I also don't like to go pure white, but in this case, I did, and there'll be an area of parts of the shoe that I go in off-white later. Going around with the Silly Putty's off and just doing some final touch-ups where the Silly Putty overlapped, I think, the tip of the tongue of the shoe around the top edges and whatnot, just touching that up. In the cartoon, her shoes were red and white, and I tried to replicate the best I could where the red and the white were in the show, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just red panels on the sides, and then everywhere else was white. So that's what I'm doing here. I didn't show the red. It's the Pro Acryl Bold Fire Red, I believe it's called. It's really my favorite red. It's when you want just super bold red, that's the red to go with. It's that Pro Acryl Bold Fire Red, I believe it is. And so I'm going ahead and just being careful to go around here and putting on the panels on both shoes. I end up coming back and putting on 2 coats, I believe, maybe 3 coats to get a nice even red coat over the white. Even though here in the video it looks like 1 is plenty, it really isn't. It was after it was done and it dried, you could see it just didn't have an even consistency across it, didn't have an even coverage. So I didn't have to go back and put 2 or 3 coats on to get that even coverage that I wanted. Here I'm using a deck tan, and this is where we're going to put that off-white color, and this is the rubber part of the shoe, the bottom of the shoe around the edges that you would typically see on a sneaker. And this kind of gives it some more interest, some more variation. I hemmed and hawed about putting it across the toe cap as well, but I ended up leaving the toe cap white. I thought it'd be a little too much if I went ahead with this deck tan. In the video, it doesn't look that much different between the 2 colors, but there really is. I might have to work on my lighting a little bit to help with this, but I think obviously my lighting is washing out my colors a little bit here. I think you'll be able to see it better when I do the bottom of the shoe. I think just going slow, nice steady, easy slow brushes to go right up against. I'm leaving a little bit of white between the red and the deck tan I'm putting on. It's hard. I know it's hard to see here in the video, but there's a little strip of white between the 2. And again, doing that on both sets of shoes. And in there you can kind of see a little bit better what the color is between the white and the until I move right into the light, and it's harder to see, of course. But anyhow, so I'm just going ahead and doing the bottom. So here we go. Here's the beginning of what was a problem with this particular model. So I'm trying to use Silly Putty here, like I did on the thigh, to mask off all of her skin because I want to now paint her shirt. And it's funny because the first Silly Putty I used worked great. And here I'm pulling it all off. It looked like I've just put it on and yanked it off, but it actually is falling off. It would not stick. The Silly Putty, after the first part worked fine. The part on her chest and her face worked great. I didn't have enough Silly Putty, obviously, in 1 egg, so I had multiple eggs, and all the other eggs that I opened up, the Silly Putty just would not stick to the model. I don't know if it's because of the matte varnish I used earlier. In here, I'm actually coming off video here, but you know, I'm trying it again, and I know it looks. I got to stay on camera better, but I know it looks like it's sticking. It's not. It's just sliding around, and there I'm wiggling it a little bit, and the video sped up too, but it is just not working. Eventually I got it, and I ended up using a combination of poster tack and the silly putty, and I was worried about poster tack because it's extremely sticky, so anyhow, so that's what I use at this point. I'm putting this pink down first because I think pink underneath a yellow is the best way to approach painting something yellow. It gives it a nice kind of vibrant yellow if you had this pinks underneath it. That's been my experience anyhow. And so I'm using the same pink I used on the base color of the skin, that sunset red. I really like this color a lot. Here I chose a warm yellow from Pro Acryl, and I'm going around and just painting the shirt yellow. Right at this point, I'm not worried about the shadows because I'm gonna go ahead and later and put the shadows back in. So I just want to get this whole shirt a solid yellow. But going back to that masking, so I used a combination of that's where it's white there. It's the poster tack, and then silly putty's of course the other color, the beige. And my concern with the poster tack was too sticky, and it'll end up being that is the problem. When I pull it off, we're gonna have some problems there. So again, going ahead, putting the yellow down, multiple coats here, letting the coats dry between applications here, between spraying it. You put too much on at once, it starts to run, you just get a mess. So the best way to go fast is slow down, let the paint dry between coats, and then just keep going in multiple coats. Here I'm using it went so fast. It's the yellow contrast paint from Zenithal, and this one's watered down a little bit, and I'm coming only from the bottom up here, and I'm just catching the bottom edges of all those folds. And so here comes time to pull this off, and it comes off, but the poster tack comes off like I knew it was going to. Just a big pain, and yeah, I just fight with it and fight with it and fight with it. The silly putty comes off perfect, just like that. It just comes off exactly how you'd want it to. And I looked online and I couldn't find anyone else that was having issues with silly putty not sticking. So I don't really know. I guess I just had a bad luck day. And here is this me fighting this poster tack. And I knew this was not going to be a great idea, but the good/bad news is I'll have take number 2 of me masking this off here in a moment, because what I realized after trying to get all this poster tack and that off the model is it also didn't seal very well, and I have some issues, a little bit of issues on the skin, but mostly with the edges of the shirt that just need to be dealt with. So again, just kind of wherever the silly putty was, no problem. Wherever the poster tack was, huge problems. And this just ends up being a masking nightmare, which is kind of like I think the trend of this channel so far. Its masking has been the real pain in the butt here. But the other way to mask this off would be more traditional tape, which I end up actually using here in a minute. You'll see a little bit of tape, and I didn't want to do that either because with so many different curves, tape just has so much of a large chance to bleed under, and but that was only the option I really had left. The other way is do some masking fluid, which I was not going to go anywhere near the masking fluid after the disaster I had with the last model, and the complete failure of the fluid. So I wasn't about to try my luck with that again. And again, here I'm just fighting that poster tack, and it's just so frustrating to have it stick. And at this point, right there, you can see a little black mark on her, underneath her arm there in her armpit. And this poster tack actually pulled off a tiny bit of the skin. Super not happy with that. And we'll have to go ahead and I actually touch that up here in just a little bit. So going in and that little mark that I had on the skin, so I have all my skin colors off on my palette that I used to kind of get to the end result of the skin. And luckily it was right on a line where I'm transitioning from a lighter color to a darker color, so it gave me some opportunities to do some wet blending here. So I started with just filling in the actual spot with the color of the skin that was closest to that area, and then I'm just blending colors over on my palette to kind of just blend it in. A lot of water, very thin coats here, and just kind of, like I said, just wet blending it into the other skin here. So here I'm hoping I can save the shirt, going around touching up all those edges that the poster tack just did not do me any favors. And also while I was peeling off all the poster tack, the top of the shirt in a few areas got marked up. That's on me. Well, you know what? The whole thing's on me, of course. But that's definitely on me. I was just, I think, getting a little frustrated with the poster tack and not realizing that I was actually marring up a few spots on the shirt. So anyhow, going around the edges, trying to touch it up, and ultimately where I land is I'm not happy. It's just not looking like it should. Touching up yellow is extremely hard when you kind of go from a brush, from an airbrush to a hand brush, and you can see right there the differences. Even after it dries, there's massive differences in the coloring and the smoothness of the yellow. So I'm not going to be happy with this. I think I've already at this point know I have to mask this again. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting the color in on those edges, making sure that at least I have the yellow everywhere the yellow needs to be, and then I know the airbrush will fade that back in again. But at this point I know I'm going to have to remask this. So I'm kind of in my head thinking, how am I gonna get this done? And this time I thought, well, maybe I'd make small ropes of the silly putty to get the edges in first, and then I can go ahead and get the larger areas covered with that. And this worked better. It was a better approach. There you can see it just doesn't stick though. You see it's coming right off her shoulder. That area underneath her head where that one shoulder strap is was just a nightmare because of the hand, the arm and hand were there. I'm using modeling sculpting tools here, putty sculpting tools to try to help. It's just not sticking. I know it looks like in a video it's sticking pretty well. It's just not. It's just I push it on there and it's just like sliding around like I'm trying to mask off a stick of butter. It was frustrating. So like I said, I'm trying to use these smaller ropes now of the silly putty to mask this off, and I'm still having my struggles there. When I push it, you can see that it's just all sliding. And the reason I'm showing so much of this in a video is just to show that there's going to be problems. When you do these projects, there's always going to be something come up. When I went into this, I fully expected my silly putty just to be another tool that I pick up from the desk and work with. And, it was at the end of the day, the tool failed me. I mean, and I still, to now, I don't know really why, when it stuck to other areas just fine. But again, here I'm using some sculpting tools to try to get this all settled in. And it's looking great. It's looking great, but then it just, one little push and it just slides away. And, when you're masking things, obviously it has to be, just right. Otherwise you're going to get yellow on the skin, or there it is. It just slid away again, just like that. So I just pull it off because it's basically falling off. So at this point, I resign myself to try to use the thinnest masking tape that I have, this striping tape here. I believe this is old Testers. I think some other companies make some now. I also got to learn to keep my head out of my videos a little bit better. So my approach here was to go ahead and put the tape in, and then try to put the silly putty. You can see I had a one-track mind at this point. I'm making the silly putty work no matter what. So I put the tape down first, and now I'm trying to put the silly putty on the tape, on the edge of the tape, and see if that'll work, see if it'll stick to the tape better. And it didn't. And this is the final result. I ended up just having to use tape and more tape, and I just built out that whole arm in tape, and then use silly putty around her head again. Here I'm just doing a final little touch-ups. There's a little bit of paint that kind of had peeled off at some point during this whole process, so I'm sanding that down to get it flat. So when I go ahead and do the final airbrushing of the shirt, that it'll look like it should. And here we go, and just going ahead and putting yellow back on the model again. And I go ahead and put the yellow on, and I don't think I showed it a second time, but I'll go back with that contrast yellow underneath again and put the shadows of the folds underneath. And for the final time, thank goodness, silly putty comes off just as you would expect, nice and easy. And there we go, final result of all the tape and putty off, and now we're right where we want to be. I'm shifting over using a base of corn red for her hair. You can see I'm actually time skipping, obviously time skipping here. This is from the first time I had her masked off, is when I actually did the hair. But anyhow, so I'm going ahead and using this dark corn red on all the shadowed areas of the hair. If you look at the comic, or I keep saying comic, but the cartoon of Misty, it's really, she's got shadow of like this brick red, and her main hair color is orange, and that's kind of all there is to the cartoon. It looks like it's pretty much a two-color approach to her hair. So I kind of want to do something similar, but do obviously some transition, some fading in there. And here I'm using this Wild Rider red from Citadel. It's Wild Rider red, it's really an orange, and I'm putting that on all from the top down, the highlighted areas. And I'll put the more of the highlight I want, the more coats of this orange I'll put on to brighten it up. And I'm holding these pieces at the angle that they're going to be at when they're on the model, to make sure that I have the highlighting coming from the right direction. And now here I'm using the combination of those two colors on my palette, and I'm going ahead and working them back and forth to get the right shading of color on her rest of her hair, that the masking of her body, or when I masked her body, it covered up part of her head here. So I'm just going ahead and like I said, I'm using those combination of the two colors I used in the airbrush, but now I'm mixing them by hand, and there I'm just kind of feathering them into the rest of the hair that's on her, that was the airbrush on her head. It always looks wrong when it's wet, but if you know you're working with the right colors, let it dry, and then when it dries, it looks like it should, like the rest of the coloring on her hair. And here I'm using more orange, even though this is a darker area, because this is, well, no, I take that back. Right here, this is behind her bangs, so this will actually be pretty light. So going ahead and just working that in, making sure not to paint her actual skin here, just going nice and slow, working my brush along this the direction of her hair. Again, this is kind of like a back and forth process. You have your colors handy on your palette, and what I do is I'm constantly blending those two colors back and forth on the palette to get the what I need. And then when I'm fading it into the existing colors, I also make sure that the paint is really thin on my brush to help with that transition, that blend. Here's that bold red I talked about earlier, and I'm using this on the suspenders. I'm just making sure I get full coverage on both sides, because there's a little bit here and there that do peek through. Here I'm using a thrash metal, I think it was scale 75, and it's a nice neutral metallic. It's not overly bright, but it's not dark either, if that makes sense. And it's kind of more on the flatter side, but it's still metallic. And I'm just using this for obviously the buckle on her belt, and these the rivets, and the whatchamacallits, I guess the buckles on her suspenders here as well, just to take care of the metal bits and bobs that are on these pieces. So just going slow, putting the little dots, the little rivet heads, a little whatnots on the side of the buckles here, and just making it nice and clean. This is nice when you also have just one color of red to deal with. Like if you do make a little bit of a mistake here with the silver, you can just easily go back to the red and kind of go back and forth between red and silver until you get it really sharp and dialed in exactly how you want it. Now the base. So the base I ended up printing on my FDM printer, my bamboo printer. So this is actually not resin, but filament plastic. And I had a little one layer line failed. That's why it's got that little patch, that little diagonal looking patch on it. And here I'm just going ahead and putting a base layer of black on it. and I don't remember what black I used, but this is one of those cases where I actually just used pure straight black. And I'm putting ahead, like I said, going ahead putting a coat of black on the base. The reason I used the FDM printer on this was there's a lot less resin, and I have the printer, and this is a very simplistic base. There's not a lot of detail to it, so it was just like the perfect candidate for an FDM base. Masking off the line in the center, using some of that pinstriping masking tape, pushing it down nice and firmly with the sculpting tool that I have. It's a rubber tip sculpting tool, just making sure that we're going to have a nice firm seal so none of the paint leaks in there. And now I'm making a mask for the center circle, and I just kind of pushed it down with the back end of my X-Acto blade here. You can see the blade's pointing up. I'm not using the blade, I'm using the other end of it just to push it down into the corners. And I have this little tip here, and that works like a cutting tip on the one side of this tool. I'm just going around there and using that to cut the circle to get a nice even circle. And just peel off the rest of the tape. And with that masked off, we're using a bright gray. I'm using this as a base layer for both the red and the white. So one half of this is white and the other half is red. You know, it's a Pokeball, representation of a Pokeball. So I wanted not a black underneath the white or the red. I thought like a nice neutral gray here would be a good undercoat to keep everything brighter. Otherwise, it would just kind of be a little. The white would be more dingy, and the red would be darker than I'd want. So, and then I have one side masked off, and putting this white on here. I believe I'm using that same bold titanium white from Pro Acryl. Now that's dry, and now I'm going ahead and putting on the masking. I took masking tape off the first side and masking the other side. Had little areas I wasn't quite happy with, a little roughness here and there. If you're too far away with the airbrush, or you go too fast or whatnot, the surface isn't smooth. It's more like a sandpapery finished surface of the paint after it dries. So if that happens, you can take, I think this is like 2000 grit I'm using here, and I just sanded it off. I'm using a microfiber towel here to wipe off all the dirt and the sanding and that, and then I went ahead and repainted it red again. And then here, just taking the masking off for the quote final reveal of the base. Here I'm using just basically a cheap acrylic lacquer from the hardware store, and I went ahead and sprayed that on the base as a final thing. I know it went super fast there. Here I'm using contrast Griffin Gray, I believe it is, for her eyeshadow. And this is watered down heavily, and I just sprayed it there above her eyes. And now we're on to doing the rest of her portrait, and starting with putting black into her eyes as well as her eyelashes, and just a little extra there around the top of her eyes. And again, just nice, slow, easy brush strokes. You want to go, just take your time. Each brush stroke you do, you just want to be intentional with it, slow with it, methodical, if you will. Also, you notice I'm constantly turning the models when I'm painting, especially when I'm doing detailed work like this. If I start a brush stroke and it doesn't feel comfortable, I stop and find out why. And it's almost always because the model's in the wrong orientation to where I need to move the brush. So I'm moving the brush around again. Now I'm onto our eyebrows, using the same, using that corn red to start with to define the eyebrow. And then once I have the eyebrows in place, that'll act as the darker shade, if you will, of the eyebrow. And then we're just finishing up that second eyebrow there. And then I'll come in with the lighter orange color and kind of doing like hash marks, if you will, on the eyebrow to give it the eyebrow look of hair. And then those lighter marks will also help with the depth of the eyebrows, just kind of make them pop, make them look more than just a couple lines above her eyes. Here I'm back to deck tan, and I'm using this for her eyes, the whites of her eyes. I don't like using pure white. I think it looks too jarring. So just a little bit of like a warm off-white color, I think is a much better approach to this. So I'm going ahead, just like I did with the black, I'm going extremely slow, careful, taking my time just to make sure I get the whites exactly where I want them. At this point, you also kind of want to think like, well, if I do make a mistake, how bad is the mistake? And I don't want to, if I do make a mistake, if I go on to the black, that's fine. I can always go back with black. But if you go past the black onto her skin, for example, then you got a lot more work ahead of you. Here I'm using a kind of a funky alchemy color, I think it was from Scale. It's like not a glitter, but it's a shiny kind of color. And it literally, when I put it on the palette, it looked like nail polish. And I thought that would be fun to try for her lips, and now actually I'm putting it on her nails as well. It's kind of more like a light bubblegum kind of a color. So I thought that would be kind of a fun color to use for her lips and her nails. Using this Pro Acryl Straight Green for the darker part of her eyes. So here I'm establishing where her eyes are. In this case, I'm having her look to her left. So to my right as I'm looking at the model. And so I'm putting this color there, and then I just kind of get the direction of the eye established first, and then go back and start shaping it out from there. And on this one, I'm making sure to leave just a tiny bit of white on that corner where I'm at of the eye too. Just, I don't want to go green all the way to the corner. I think that look a little unnatural. I want to leave a little bit of white. And then again, like I said, I'm just turning the model, defining the shape of the iris. And now I'm going back and kind of reinforcing the color, making sure I have a nice solid green there. And now I'm using a bright pale green by Pro Acryl, and then this is to give it more interest to the eye, like a secondary color, if you will. And this I'm leaving just a little bit of the darker green around all the rim of the iris here. So this is kind of just getting in there more and more in the center. And I'm putting this on pretty thin to kind of let kind of both greens be visible, if that makes sense. And again, nice slow, sometimes almost tapping the brush just to get it exactly where I want. And then the last thing is to figure out where I want the pupils. And the pupils are going to be fairly large with her. Again, I start small just to identify exactly where the center is going to be. And then once I have it there, I start increasing the size of them. Now during this process, I know I went back and forth between black and the light green to shape them. It's not only the challenge is getting the pupil the right size, it's also the right shape, which is obviously round in this case. And you know, it's really easy for a pupil to kind of get a little out of whack, a little wackadoodle there with its, its shape. It might all of a sudden be oval or triangular or whatnot. So it's nice to have that other color handy to go back and reshape it back down to its the right shape it should be. So I'm kind of going back and forth a little bit with the black and the greens just to dial that into the final eye or eyes. I'm using a gloss varnish just to put a little shine into her eyes. I think it looks really nice. I'm not the biggest fan of this particular gloss varnish. I think I'd like to try a different brand to see. It's fine. I just feel that it could be a little better. Okay, onto assembly. So I have both this E6000 and super glue that I'm using. And I'm just using the broken off tip of a Q-tip here for my stick for the E6000. Basically, I use E6000 as the primary strength glue, but it takes a long time for it to dry. So what I usually end up doing is I'll take the E6000 and I'll put it into the recesses where the keys would go of like the main supporting pieces. And then I go ahead and use the super glue around the smaller edges, and that just keeps it in place more temporarily. so I can continue to build the model, and then the E6000 glue will dry over the next, I think it's 48 hours it takes to fully dry. So I put the legs to the shorts first, and now I'm putting the glue onto the base. Same idea, the E6000 into the main key of the top of her shorts, and just using a little bit of the super glue. I know I started with one super glue and I switched over. The one tube I had was dried out, so I had to switch to a different one. And moving her around. Now here I'm putting her hair on before I put her to her top half to her bottom half. First time with her hair on, and it really changes her look quite a bit, her facial expression, and it makes her eyes look different and everything, which is pretty cool. And the last piece, and I didn't show this in a video painting it, but it's very straightforward, painting the Pokeball and put a gloss varnish on that. She's holding the ball, and with that final touch, this model is ready to be put on display. I want to thank everyone that's been watching my videos or my video. I'm a new YouTuber, and the amount of support and viewing that my first video got of Jinx was it just blew my mind. So again, I want to thank everyone. Thank you if you made it to the end of this video. I'm very grateful for that, being like a brand new YouTuber here. I've got a lot to learn with the whole process of video editing and recording and all that. So I definitely ask for patience as I try to get better at this. But again, thank you so much for the support, the comments, and the watching what I do. I'm super thrilled that you guys find some interest or some value in what I do. So thank you very much, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.